Om Shuklam Baradaram Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarvavighnopashantaye Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murtibheda Vibhagine Vyomavad-vyapta-dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, so as you know, this is the second of two talks, and we've been looking at this text, Durvasanapratikaradashakam. It's a set of 10 verses that talks about vasanas, durvasanas, certain tendencies that are there in us, you know, some natural and they are there since birth, and some that are learned, that are cultivated over a period of time. But these are those tendencies that become impediments to our to our growth, to our emotional growth also, but more here spiritual growth in this particular context. So we've seen three verses, and there is quite a bit to see. So I'll just get into the fourth one, uh, and we'll continue. Okay. Number 4, Nidram Satvika Sevikataya Swapnam Sada Jagarat Rogan Jeernamitashanat Jahi Sada Dainyam Mahadhairyatah Arthanarthaparigraham Tyaja Pratha Samsarga Santyagataha Stri Vancha Tyaja Dosha Darshana Balat Dukkham Sukhat Mekshanat. So here, certain vasanas, certain tendencies are pointed out, and how one can learn to counter them, how one can outgrow them, grow out of them, overcome them. The idea here is not just to categorize people or to look down upon others or to look down upon oneself either, but to identify these are all natural things. The mind has certain ways of responding to situations, just as the body responds to things naturally. Like that, our mind also responds in a certain way, in certain ways. Then the response itself may be appropriate or not appropriate, depending on how we interpret things. But the response itself is natural, it's not created by us. So we got to keep that in mind. So one need not look upon this in terms of good and bad that way, but look upon it more as these are the things that are a reflection of my lack of growth, lack of immaturity, and that is really not a comfortable state to be in. And so, how one can learn to overcome them. So that's a healthier way to approach it and also deal with it. So anyway, so going on further, he says Nidram. Nidram means sleep. Sleep is deep sleep associated with tamas, tamoguna. You know? So tamoguna is a state of mind in which, so one is, for example, ignorant, laziness. Sleep, deep sleep is called tamas. So lack of motivation and things like that. So that is something, is an obstacle. Okay. An obstacle to one's being able to not only accomplish things, but also to grow. And so one has to overcome. In terms of gunas, we know there are sattva, rajas, and tamo gunas. Okay. And growth involves a movement from the tamas, so which is the lethargy, inertia, a state of inertia, to rajas, which is a state of more dynamism and activity and motivation, to finally sattva, which is a state of tranquility, peace, calmness, and maturity. So here he says Satvika Vastu Sevikataya means disposition, cultivating a disposition that ultimately is predominantly. Each one has all these tendencies within them, all the qualities within them, but it is what predominates at a given time and what predominates generally. Okay. So here the goal growth itself implies moving from the more predominant sattva gunas and so whatever. So in religious pursuit, this is in terms of the things we do to cultivate the sattva gunas, things like engaging in activities like prayer and other religious activities, including learning and so on. So then another state, Nidra is one state, deep sleep, but the other state is Swapnam. Swapnam Sada Jagara. Swapnam is dream. So here dream is there's one state of dream associated with sleep. Okay. So you go to sleep and then there is a dream state. In dream state, the mind is active. Okay. The physical body is also active unconsciously. So one is not conscious of the physical world and the physical body, but then one is conscious of another world, and that is what is the dream world. So he says, now this is one state of the dream. There is another kind of dream too, which we say is like daydreaming. So daydreaming, one need not be asleep to dream. One can be awake. And when I say I am awake, what am I awake to? I am awake to something. I am awake to the world. I'm awake to what's happening around me. Okay. So there is one form of being conscious of what's around me. Or I can be awake, not conscious of the world, not awake to the world, even though I'm awake, because I'm lost in my own thinking. And that is what we call is daydreaming. So here when we say swapnam, so one is swapnam, dream. When I'm sleeping, I really can't do anything about that. Okay, because it's not under my control. But there is another, while awake, I'm not mindful of the world that is there around me. I'm not relating to the realities of the things around me. That also is another kind of dreaming, is a fantasy, living in a world of fantasy. So I'm not responding to the realities around me. And so that has to be gotten over also. So he says Sada Jagara. Jagarat means to be awake, awaken, awake to things, be conscious of, be alert to one's environment, to also to oneself. Very often we are not conscious of what's going on with us. And if we are conscious what's going on with us, our mind, that's why mind runs away from us. We end up in a situation, even in terms of our thinking or in terms of our feelings, which where we don't want to be. So it's like the mind has gotten away from me. And suddenly I find myself, why did I think this way? Why do I feel this way? And I myself don't know how I got there. So these are all the consequences of not being alert and awake to one's own, not only the environment, but also one's own thoughts and feelings and tendencies. So learning to learning to do that. Meditation is one practice that helps in this particular process. It helps to be self-awareful. And that is one thing. The other thing is also being aware to other things which are not so obvious. So in a religious pursuit, Daivam is what we talk about. So being aware of, being conscious of, learning to recognize the divinity that surrounds us, the divinity that pervades us. Going on. रोगान जीर्ण विषातनाम जहि सदा दैन्यम महाधैर्यता. Rogan is illnesses. Okay. Roga, we all know that. So physical illnesses, different kinds of disorders, how, which again are impediments. Okay. It's not always under our control, but sometimes it is under our control because of so improper eating and things like that. Okay. So we hurt ourselves. So by doing things which we are not supposed to do. So the jirna mitasha, ashana means to eat. Okay. So the kind of intake of food, drink, etc., which is measured, the measured. Ayurveda always emphasizes a lot on prevention of illness, and then a cure is one aspect of it, but it's also so in terms of preventing illness. Okay. So there's proper diet and proper lifestyle. The one, two, that is how one overcomes this tendency to illnesses, which are also an obstacle for one's spiritual, emotional, physical growth. Dainyam is deenasya bhavam. The sense of poor me, that poor me, the unfortunate me, the wretched me. So this kind, why do things happen to me all the time? I'm useless. I'm no good. So this kind of everybody's after me. It looks like that. Even misfortune. So misfortune has disappeared. Lakshmi has disappeared. Only Alakshmi is there with me all the time. So this kind of feeling oneself as a victim, what they call as the victim complex. Okay. This is another thing which we fall into. It's a trap. The trap. Nobody is really a victim in this world. We are born. Each one is born with positives, certain negatives, certain strengths, certain weaknesses, and we live our life trying to manage them, overcome them, okay, and work around them. So this Mahadhairyam, for which we need patience. We need patience and we need courage also. When things are down, instead of looking upon oneself as a victim, as a injustice, they call them injustice collectors. These are person who feel always that I have been a victimized by by people, by everything. No. So having patience, having the courage. So and especially in times of adversity, when things are not going the way I would like them to go, even then it is not because the nature, the world is against me. It is just because of things that happen, the ups and downs of life. Arthanartha parigraham. What happened? Here. Arthanartha parigraham tyaja. Vritha samsarga santyagata. Arthas are the possessions. Accumulating, accumulating possessions. Okay. So more than one's own needs. We have needs. There are basic necessities and luxuries, right? That's what they say. So what are necessities? Necessities are things that, so what we need to live a life of relative, let's say relative comfort, okay, where one doesn't have to struggle for survival, struggle to have some comforts. So which most people are able to do, to achieve, to accomplish. But they need certain necessities are there of life. So this is at one level. And then there are luxuries. Luxuries are things which most people cannot have, and only some people have. Some people have. Okay. So there are some who are learning to be also content with what one has. So should one seek necessities or should one seek luxuries? So here one can't make a categorical statement. I can't say nobody go, oh, you should have only necessities, you should not have luxuries, etc. Because nobody can really define it, the general definition. But for some, after a while, when they start initially things maybe luxury, the luxury becomes a necessity. We all know that. So in life, we get used to it and then we cannot do without it. Then I'm looking for other luxuries. And so this process goes on. In the meanwhile, That artham, the things which I gather, which I accomplish, which are supposed to make me feel content and happy, never make me contented. I'm always looking for more and more because whatever I have is not enough. It's like artham becomes anartham. This is the samsara. This is what is called as samsara. Okay. So this is not very productive. The whole thing is not a productive approach to living. So learning to recognize that, learning to be content, we can have more, we can achieve for more, but at the same time also learn to be content with what one has. My needs for things should not be driven by others' needs for things. We fall into that trap. We look at what others have and then we want to have them just because they have it. So before that, I never thought of it. So our seeking should not be dependent on others' seeking. Our should be dependent on our own seeking. And so again, which need not be born out of insecurities and greed, but so that aspect of it is learning to be content and not get into this trap of samsara. Okay. Let not these arthas become anarthas. Let them not become a source of making me more and more dissatisfied. Okay. Then Sri Vancha Dosha Darshan. So Sri Vancha here is this longing. Really speaking, it's not restricted. Sri is female, but it really applies to everybody. Having talked about objects, things of the world, now he comes to the people. So he is seeking the company, seeking the Sri here, the use of a person, individual. It applies to men and women both. But that is the strong source of distraction it can become. So it's taken as an example, but really applies to any worldly desire. The same thing can apply to that. So here he says it can become a hindrance to my sense of maturity and freedom. So here he says recognizing dosha darshanam. Dosham means really fault or blemish, but fault in terms of limitations. When we identify faults with somebody, most of the time when it comes to people, it is not their fault. It is really our expectation. It's often connected to our judgment and our expectations of people. When they are not fulfilled, when somebody cannot fulfill them, we often externalize it and we make it a fault of theirs. Okay. So here recognizing what is at fault, what is not at fault, etc. A lot has to be realistic in our own understanding of individuals that we relate to so that our expectations are not inappropriate, okay, or more than can be recognized. So projecting false attributes on others, that is also a part of it. So tempering in one's a tempered relationship with whoever it may be. He says initially any individual, and not only that, he says, so dukkham. Oh, okay, so anyway, this is with respect to the person. Later on, he'll even get still more specific when it is not just individuals in general, but here more specific, one's own family, for example. So that will come later. But in the meanwhile, he also says, Dukkham Sukhat Mekshanat. Dukkham is sadness, sorrow. So learning to understand what exactly, what is this sorrow, sadness? Should I be sad or should I not be sad? Can I control it? It is unpleasant, undesirable. We say that Ananda, right? A, a wise man never experiences any sadness. What is the sadness that we talk about? So what happens if his mother dies? Does it mean that he's happy? His name is Ananda. So he has to be Ananda all the time. And then his parents died. And so he doesn't experience. What does he experience? Does he experience ananda out of that, or does he experience some sorrow from the loss? So there is a sadness as a response of the mind. I mentioned in the beginning. So therefore, the shariram, like the physical body, has certain characteristics. Mind also has certain characteristics. So it responds to loss, etc., in a certain way. So that is it's a transient state of sadness, of bereavement connected to loss, and so on. That is natural. One can deny it, one can suppress it, but it is going to be the natural response. Then there is another dukkham, which is melancholy. There is a sorrow that is deeper, that is associated with our cognitive process, thinking. So the mind goes through a transient state of sadness, which is natural, but then my own thinking, my own judgment, my own conclusions. So these are all my things that I build up. And that is what results in a much deeper state, which doesn't go away easily. And that is what is called as this deep melancholy. So he says, understanding the nature of ananda, of happiness, as a state of the mind, it is all centered upon one's thinking and feelings. And then there's another thing, which is the source of happiness, which is where it comes from. So therefore he says, Sukhatma Ikshanam is understanding what? The nature of Sukham, but also Sukham ultimately as its very source being oneself, okay, or one's own Atma. That is at a deeper level. Then we go on to the next one. Dara Sakti Manadara Tyaja Sutadhana Saktim Tvanityatvatah Sneham Moha Visarjanat Karunaya Naishthuryamantastaj Audasinyamas Samashraya Tyaja Suhrin Mitradi Durvasana Sarvanartakaran Dashendriya Ripun Ekantavasatyahi Dara Saktim Anadarat Tyaja. Dara Sakti. So we talked about attachment before. Asakti is a deep attachment. Sakti means attachment. Asakti is not attachment. Asakti is deep attachment. So deep attachment to Dara. Dara is spouse. Okay. So this excessive attachment, this is in Bhagavad Gita also Bhagavan talks about it. Asakti and anabhishvangaha putra dara grihadishu. He says. So this kind of deep attachment, so a deep attachment, which is a takes on can take on the form of possessiveness and things like that. Okay. So with respect to people one is close to. So there he says, so Dara and Putra Griham, etc. The spouse, the progeny, the house, etc. So there is a deep attachment. Yes. Adara is excessive worry, excessive concern. So worrying constantly about other people, even those we are close to. So here that once you get to that stage, then it is unproductive. Okay. It doesn't help. It doesn't help. Excessive worrying. Sometimes one can be concerned. One needs to be concerned about people when necessary. But then sometimes when it is not necessary also, that concerns becomes excessive and that can lead to one's own anxieties and fears, etc. So this learning to have a degree of like this deep attachment, overcoming that, learning how to cope with that by having the proper perspective, even in terms of close relationship. Have a certain objectivity, have a concern, but not anxiety, not worrying to an extent that immobilizes me. So Audasinyam samashraya. It says, where is this? Okay, so Audasinya samashraya tyaja suhrin mitradi durvasana. Suhrit, Vritta, Mitram, etc. See, this is Suhrit. Who is a Suhrit? Page. I just read that. Six. Just give me a second. Huh. Okay, Daras. Oh, here. Okay. Suhrit. So this person is a friend. Suhrit is a well-wisher. So someone who wishes good for me. Mitram is a friend. So friend is one who has a certain degree of also a well-wisher, but there is affection. So it's a more intimate relationship with a friend. So he says we categorize, we have all these categories. This person is a friend. This person is not a friend. He's my well-wisher. We categorize people. When we categorize people into different, it's called binary thinking. Sometimes we get involved in this binary thinking. Binary thinking is thinking in terms of black and white. So either there is black or there is no gray in between. So good or bad. If a person is good, then there is no badness in them at all. If the person is bad, then I don't see any goodness in them at all. So that kind of a thinking is called as binary thinking. That is really not at all consistent with the realities. The world is not like that. The world cannot be divided. If you're my friend, then you're not my enemy. If you're not my friend, you're my enemy. There is no in between. If you agree with me, then you're my friend. If you don't agree with me, you're my enemy. So this kind of thing we get into is not unusual. So if I'm right, you're wrong. Then if I'm wrong, you're right. Okay, so there is no in between. So if I'm not able to see the in between, okay, then what happens? The life is full of nuances. There are grays in between. Nobody is always good. Nobody is always bad. There is right and sometimes both can be right, sometimes both can be wrong. Okay. There are different perspectives, there are different degrees, and so on. So, this kind of binary thinking or categorical thinking is not something. What happens when I do this? It doesn't allow me to, to look at perspectives. It doesn't allow me to become objective in life. And it also interferes with solving problems. One cannot solve problems if, if one thinks like that. Even if there are problems, if there are conflicts, one cannot solve the conflicts because one is not able to see another perspective. So one is one's perspective and is the other perspective, which is the opposite. So there is no in between ground. So these kinds of thinking is something which is one has to get over. He says, Audasinium is a swabhavam. It is a objectivity, being a little bit distance, being objective. So in order to avoid this kind of, it's all personal. the personal biases. We can take it that way. So we all have our own biases, our own way of judging things, and so which are personal. It doesn't have to do much with the reality of things. So learning to be objective in such circumstances, he says, makes us possible to deal with situations, to have a greater depth of understanding with the world and also with oneself. Okay. Let me just mute this. I need some mute. Yeah, iPad 4, can you please mute? Sarvanartha Karan Dashendriya Ripun Ekantavasat Jahi. Dashendriya Ripun. Okay. Dashendriyas we all know. These are the senses, the organs of sense perceptions and organs of action. Okay. Five sense organs, five organs of action. These are the Dashendriya, Indriyas. It says Ripuhu. Ripuhu is inimical. So Indriyas themselves are not inimical. Okay. Indriyas are Indriyas. They're instruments. My sense organs are instruments through which I take in the world and I interact with the world. My organs of action are actions with which I interact with the world. So with one is like an input, the other one is an output. And so these are instruments of action. But then I'm the one who wields them. I'm the one who wields them. If I do not wield them properly, if I do not use them properly in the way they are meant, for what they are meant for, then what happens? I become a victim of them. It's like sense organs. I look at the world and I am meant to, I'm meant to use my senses in order to interact the world. I should be in control. But if I'm not in control, then the senses are the one that direct me to do, to do, to do things. I become entrapped by the senses. So he says, then it becomes inimical to me. He says, Sarva Anartha. So we have to learn to distance ourselves from that. This is Ekanta Vasa. So separating oneself from this. So too much input of the environment is quite, Ekantam generally we think of so quietude and solitude. Learning to be with solitude also is important. One has to learn to be away from, these indriyas. I'm constantly connected to the world and interacting with the world. But when I pull away from my senses, what happens? What happens? I can't just totally pull away from everything. I'm with myself. And when I'm with myself now, that is the world that I'm interacting with. Not the external world is that in fact a distraction. When I pull away from the external world, then I'm with myself. Now, what am I going to do with myself? Okay. I can't use myself as a distraction. I have to live with myself. I have to become acquainted with myself first. I have to become familiar with myself. I have to get to know myself, recognize myself, not be surprised by myself. So then this learning to be with oneself in a manner that one is comfortable and content, that is ekantam, really speaking. Ekam antam is here. For one whom ultimately it is one only. So one is able to reach that end, which is oneself, and be comfortable with that. That is called true ekantam. The senses serve a certain purpose. You realize them, be in control, but at the same time be comfortable being with oneself. So Ekantavasa Jahi. Jahi, remember in Jahi it said for everything. So he says Jahi is to give up, to overcome. So he gives the Durvasana and then he gives a mechanism by which one can, or one of the mechanisms by which one can overcome them. Number 6, Alasyam Tvaraya Shramam Shamadhiya Tandram Samuthanataha Bheda Bhrantim Abheda Darshana Balat Mithyatmatam Satyataha Narmoktam Narmoktim Nija Marma Karma Kathaya Droham Swasamye Kshanat Akrosham Kushaloktitasthyaja Manaschindya Pramadat Bhayam. Alasyam. Alasyam is alasya, alsi, they say in Hindi. So the laziness. One who is lazy, one who lacks motivation, says. Shaktasyapi anutsaha. I'm not able to do this. I'm unable to do this. This kind of a feeling, even when it is not necessary. The person is capable, feeling incapable while being capable. Okay, that is kind of a laziness. Or so with respect to actions or procrastination, is that another expression of it? All expressions of tamas, and due to different reasons are there. So why we procrastinate, why we don't do things, why we feel we are unable to do things. So sometimes it is maybe just a fear. If I do thing, I may not succeed. That is what is called as fear of failure. It says. Or so being afraid of the negative. It might not work. It might not work. Or there might be some negative consequence. Or just it's too much. It's too much. Sometimes I look at the problem. Like they say, I have to go a long distance. I have to go a long distance. And then I look at the end point, and it is so far away. And so then I don't feel like starting it. But then you just start. You look at the short distances, and then you reach your destination. So like that, it says being overwhelmed. Sometimes you look at the whole problem and looks very overwhelming. Then you break it up into parts, and then you are able to accomplish anything. You say it has to do with cleaning up. We all know that. Okay. Things pile up. So dishes pile up. Breakfast, then lunch, then this, then tea, then dishes keep piling up. And then I look at the whole sink, and then it's too much. Don't even feel like starting. It's sitting there. But start at one end, and you will finish at the other. Anyway, so this kind of tvaraya is, so tvara is get up and get going. Immediately, be quick to, don't wait to act, be quick to act. In Aditya Hridayam, is Bhagavan, so Sri Rama, Agastya gives him the whole prayer. So the Aditya Hridayam is done, and then gods are also listening to that. And then once the whole thing is over, Sri Rama now is ready for the fight. And so at that situation, so the gods don't want him to think more. So they tell him, Twara, Twara, Twara. So Twara means just get up and get started. Don't think about it more because you might change your mind. Okay. So that kind of a thinking to deal with procrastination. Push yourself and do it. Oh, yeah. Shramam Shamadiya. Shramam is tired. So again, you're tired from doing things. I feel tired. I feel fatigued. So either physically also when we do too much, we get exhausted. But mentally also we do. So thinking too much, worrying too much, and so on, that also exhausts me mentally. So he says, both they may be counted by shamam. Shamam, learning to be so content, learning to be satisfied with what I had. These are certain attitudes which automatically counter the other negative attitude. One has to be learned to be satisfied with what one has. If I'm not satisfied with what I have, or if I cannot learn to be satisfied with what I have, I will not be satisfied with what I will have. Generally, we think that by having something more than what I have will make me more satisfied. It doesn't work that. Satisfaction comes in the present, not in the future. Okay. If I can't be content in the present, I'm not going to be content in the future. Okay. If I think along those lines, then I will get it now because I'm always only in the present. I'm never in the future. So we have to orient our thinking in a way that, well, whatever I have, if I'm not satisfied, then something else is not going to make me more satisfied. It's a state of the mind which has to be accomplished in the present, not in the future. That is called as shamadhi. Shamadhi. Tandram. Tandram samuttanataha. Tandram also similar. It's like a sluggishness, lack of motivation, not he says samuthana means so getting up, pushing yourself to get up. I have to. So self-talking, self-motivation. So you sometimes you just have to do it. Just do it because you push yourself to do it. There's no sitting and trying to figure it out. So Bhagavan Krishna also tells him in the beginning, Arjuna, now get up and hatva papchasi swargam. Whether you win or you lose, you're going to win. You're going to be a winner. So don't think about it too much. Just get up and do it. So that kind of an act. Sometimes we have to use as a countermeasure. Different means are there for different kinds of obstacles. That's why, like our gods have so many weapons, so many ayudas. Why do they have so many varieties of things? They have astrams, they have shastrams, they have weapons that go, they have weapons that come back, like Sudarshanam and so on. Why is that? Because there are so many types of asuras. They all have unique characteristics. So of remaining, they are persistent. They don't go away. Sometimes you kill them and the more of them arise. Sometimes they grow like mushrooms. So sometimes they grow big. And so different things are always necessary. Same thing is there with Durvasanas also. That's why so many he gives. Not that we have to remember each one of them, but just get the whole picture. Bheda Bhranti, Abheda Darshan. Bheda Bhranti. So Bhedam is, so Bheda, differences. Okay. So we emphasize the differences. It's like the categorizing people. So there are, you know, when we say there are differences in everything. There are differences among people. Then, but these differences they are differences. Okay. There's nothing else, nothing wrong in things being different. What's wrong with thinking different? Sort of. Sometimes the things are also unequal. What's wrong in things being unequal? So there is this whole big thing of going on about equality and things like that. So things are unequal. So things are going to be everybody's not of the same size. Everybody's not of the same weight. One can't have everything being everything absolutely equal to everything. Then you're going to have only one thing. There's going to be no variety in this world. But anyway, but Vedas are there. And we create Vedas also. But on what basis? Differences are always have some basis. You take something, and then according to that, there are differences in height, differences in weight, differences in character, differences in qualities, differences. If you have to have a reference point, and then there are differences. Okay? But then the very fact that we create differences or we make differences also shows that there is something underlying which is not difference. Okay. Something is there which is not, there are two people. And in these two people now, I see differences. I start seeing differences based on different factors. Okay. But then, in order to create the differences, there has to be something similar. There has to be something similar. For example, both are people. So the fact that both are people is similar. This is a man, this is a man. There is oneness there. There is similarity. Now there is underlying similarity on top of which I superimpose the differences, right? I cannot just have differences without a similarity. So here, the basis of differences is what? It is my drishti. It is how I see it, how I categorize it, how the reference points act. And this can give rise to prejudices and biases and so on. False. That is all connected to false thinking and false judgment. Okay. So Bheda Bhranti, therefore, Bhranti is an error, erroneous thinking that is connected to this kind of separations and divisions, he says. Then counter it by the proper thinking. And what is the proper thinking? Proper thinking is there is abhedam between them. Underlying the bhedam, there is abheda. Underlying the differences, there is something which is common. So recognize the common, even while you can see some differences, it itself need not be a problem. But if I don't see the common things, abhedam, then the differences are going to create a problem. It's going to make me biased and prejudiced and so on. So, मिथ्यात्वताम सत्यतः मिथ्यात्मत्वम मिथ्यात्म मिथ्या is a falsehood. Falsehood, deceitfulness is called mithyatvam. Okay. So the things presenting, looking at things, presenting something unreal or something real which is unreal. Okay. Presenting the falsehood as the truth is called one kind of falsehood. So deceitfulness also there is certain other for some motive is there why one does it. Okay. So there is this kinds of deception, self-deception also. There is such a thing as we deceive others or one can deceive oneself also. For various different reasons are there why we do that. So anyway, satyataha means by being through learning to be valuing. In fact, first I have to have value for truth and then being truthful to oneself and then obviously being truthful to others also. Narmoktim nija marma karma kataya. Narmoktim. Narmoktim is, these are all negative ways in which we relate to people. Sarcasm, mockery, cynicism, So that, in the name of humor, sometimes we mock people. We say negative, we present our negativity through statements which seemingly don't look so negative. Okay. So, but they carry a negative message. So, all these kinds of things, the mental tricks we do. So, Nija Marma Karma, he says, so we do all this because there's a cover for our own inadequacies, our own self-esteem, low self-esteem, we think poor of ourselves, and then try to put other people down. So all those things. So we have to self-reflect. So self-reflection, being able to accept one's limitations, and so no need to then project it onto other people. Droham. These are all different degrees of the same kind of problem. He says droha is hostility, spitefulness, malice. So some kind of a tendency or impulse to give pain to the other. So hurt another person, make them feel uncomfortable and so on. These are all reactive. So as a way of unburdening our own issues, our own problems. This is Swasamyekshanat, samyam. This is to just avoid doing that. Akrosham, again another aspect of it. So using language which hurts people. This is Kushalokti, making a deliberate attempt to recognize, to look at the positive things in other people rather than the negativities. Then bhayam, fear is. So fear, manas chindi, Apramadat. He says connected to the mind. So connected to the mind, he says, and the duality, the separation differences that we create, that we see between ourselves and others. The more we see human, the more we look at our own minds. I've seen this. As one knows oneself more, and one is able to recognize one's own limitations and weaknesses, then then it's we see we are not much different from others, and others are not much different from us either. So it's just a matter of degrees and some qualitative differences there. But otherwise, really speaking, nobody is better than another. Nobody is worse than another person. Number 7, Bhutarthasmaranam Vrithashramadhiya Praptam Tuhanekshana Bhavyarthavyasanam Sada Tyajamanaf Prarabdha Chodyokshana शिष्टाशिष्टजनक्रियास्त्यज वृथा कष्टानुसन्धानतः स्नेहद्वेषकथा सदा जने भस्मान्तता संस्मृतेः भूतार्थस्मरणम् वृथा श्रमणधि bhutam is what is going to so rumination, thinking, repetitive thinking, or same thing over and over again without reaching any conclusion. We tend to ruminate. Sometimes, it's necessary. Sometimes it's necessary. So in situations where one is traumatized, one one has to ruminate. So because you think over, you go over it's called repetitive compulsion. You go over it again and again and again as a way of desensitizing yourself. Like when you have an accident, you get a fender bender. We all been through this. Okay? Somebody hits you from the back and you're all shook up. And then, or you have a car accident, but you're okay. And then next, you're afraid to get into the car. Right? Or you keep thinking about it over and over again. You keep talking about it over and over again. So sometimes this is a way of coping, and eventually it subsides. Sometimes it doesn't subside. So we get caught up in this whirlpool of thinking, and then it gives rise to become negative. So then this unnecessary worrying and anxiety. Vritha ashramam. One has to really see. You have to talk yourself out of this. The talk out. So that is vritha. Use unproductive. Beyond a certain point, it is unproductive. So one have to really recognize this, be aware of it, and then challenge this kind of a negative process. Sometimes we do use relaxation techniques in order to relax oneself so that one doesn't get into this trap. Yes. Praptam hanekshanat hanam. Praptam is what one's gains. Prapti. Prapti is gain. Okay, different gains we have. Different gains in life. Endowments. Different endowments. I'm born with certain endowments. Endowments is not just money. So it may be money, gunas, in terms of qualities, in terms of pedigree, in terms of whatever, wealth, in terms of, or so these are endowments which have come to me, inheritance, or he says accomplishments also maybe. So by my own effort, I accomplish this. And so I'm endowed with certain things that way. Or he says, even on a spiritual level, prapti, the word prapti is one of the Ashta Siddhis. Okay. So being able to get whatever one wants. Okay. So anything you desire, sankalpam you do, and that happens. You can achieve that. It is considered one of the Ashta Siddhis. Even at that level, he says prapti, all these kinds of different things. He says, Hanekshanam. itself are not going to make me secure itself, because these are endowed. They can go also. Money can be there too. Whatever one gains is subject to loss. Sometimes we take things for granted, what we have, even if we may have accomplished this, forgetting that each one of them is subject to loss either. Not only that, there are there's so many things are involved in any accomplishment. One can't take full credit for it, for anything, any kind of prapti. Cannot take full. There is Daivam there. There are other people there. And so all these are different factors. If I give credit to each one for what they have contributed to what I have and to who I am, then I find that there is not much credit left for myself, because so many people have been involved in it. So that kind of thinking is a mature thinking, to recognize that. Otherwise, this prapti can give rise to arrogance and pride and so on, superiority. Bhavyartha Vesanam Mana Prarabdha Chodekshana. Bhavyartham. So Bhavyam, this is what is going to be, So the first one, Prapti, is what I achieved. Then we talked of rumination or worrying about the future, he says. So future, understanding the role of Prarabdham, says. Prarabdham and so Purushartha. Chodyam, you know. Chodyam is what impels me to act, which is Purushartha. So understanding the role of Prarabdham and Purushartha also in one's life, so helps me not get into the trap of worrying about the future. I'll just leave it at that. We can talk about each of these things quite a bit. Shishta Shishta Janakriya. Vritha Kashtanusandhanataha. Sneha Dveshamatim Bhasmantata Samspritehi. So, Nasti Akritaha Kritena. So, all the Kriyas, he says, this has to do with all the actions. Okay. So, accomplishments and all are talked about. Then, in general, in connection with the karma. So, any karma that we do, he says, itself, you know, all these things that we do in order to gain a certain level of maturity in terms of emotions and thinking, intelligence. Okay. But in terms of the religious pursuit, he says, so there also, this all gets me up to a certain point. But then ultimately, I have to get that religious, talk of moksha here. So, Nasti, this itself won't give me the ultimate end. But there's a whole aspect of so prayerfulness, divinity. This all prepares the mind, a mature mind. A mature mind is then able to achieve that ultimate end. That is what he talks about. And this is the life. Asmantata samskrite. This is the ultimate. So keeping in mind the samsara, life of samsara, maturity and growth, and then seeking the ultimate fulfillment. I think this is enough for this. Then eighth one, Adhyatmanubhavan Manasyaja Mahat Papam Swabhavekshana Vaishamyam Samabhavatah Parakatha Vikshobham Akshobhatah धिक्कारादिभवं तु दुःखमनिशं तद्योग्यता भावनात् तज्जानान्यशुच क्षमस्व कृपया कर्मक्षयात् ताडनम् मनः त्यज अध्यात्म अनुभवात्. So manaha, I'll give up the manaha, the mind. So he says So here he talks of Atma Jnana. Okay. So it was leading up to that. So the mind itself, transcending one's mind. Okay. So these are all at the level of one's mind. But ultimately, he says, you have to come to recognize your own Swarupam. So that mind itself has to be, Yaja, giving up here is not some kind of zoning out. Here it is, transcending them. So transcending also doesn't mean get out of the mind somewhere. Transcending means rising above the what the mind does. In other words, I go to that which sustains the mind itself, which is myself, which is Atma. So therefore he says, Adhyatma Anubhava. So by recognizing one's Swarupam, this is Atma Jnanam, is Adhyatma Anubhava. Okay, so experiencing the true nature of one's own Atma. Atma Jnanam, he says, by this alone one can transcend one's mind. Mahat Papam, Mahapapam. What is the Mahapapam? Avidya here. So the self-ignorance is the Mahapapam. Remember, we started off with self-ignorance. So that was the starting point of all the Durvasana. So he says the end point also here. Here the end point of this avidya in the form of Mahat Papam, he says is given up, which is the root cause of my limitations, my sorrow, my individuality. So that is to be given up. Why? By understanding one's swabhavam, atma swabhava. Swabhava ikshana. Vaishanyam, lack of just injustice, he says, lack of equality, he says, or bias, prejudice, etc. Samabhavataha. So samatvam, he says, samatvam yoga uchyate. Samatva, atmajnanam with respect to myself. But then what about the others? If I'm still alive in the world, there is a samatvam with others. It's true for everybody. It's not just something unique to myself, but this is the essential nature of every individual. Parakatha vikshobham, being parakatha, other people, not getting disturbed by other people, other stories, katha stories, talks, gossip, and so on. So remaining unperturbed. Akshobham is remaining calm, remaining tranquil, like Buddha. One of the names of Gautama Buddha, is called Akshobha Buddha. One of the form, you see his form is a form which is very unperturbed, quiet, tranquil, immersed in one's own tranquility. That kind of a thing. Then Anisham Dukham, it says Dhikkaradibhavam. Anisham Dukham. Sorrow, intense sorrow born of Dhikkaram. Dhikkaram is others people, other people, born of other people, really. So other people's criticism, putting oneself down, etc. So this also gives rise to some sorrow. He says, when others criticize us, we become sad and upset. Why? Because we take it on. We we take it too seriously. We take it too seriously. Then let them do what they have to do. Let them say what they have to say. But then I need not internalize these things, he says. Even though it may be not correct, but then let it be. Just let it be. Just let it go. Shamayam, overcome by Shama. Shama is forgiveness. Forgiveness here is not this typical concept of forgiveness. We've seen this. I forgive you and all. Nobody forgives anybody. Can't really forgive. To forgive means to not seek vengeance, to not seek retaliation, to not seek retribution. And I've said this before. To truly be just in your retribution. Suppose I say, okay, you take revenge. It's okay, fine, go take revenge. Now you're a just person. You want to take revenge which is just, which is proper, which is impossible to do. Because you never know where the other person came from, what they did. why they did it, what motivated them. All those things you have to sit down and figure out to be truly just in your vengeance, which we cannot do. So therefore, what do? We leave it to Bhagavan. That's why. Therefore, they say, so vengeance is thine to the Lord. Yes, it's Bhagavan. Vengeance belongs to Bhagavan. In other words, karma. It's all karma. So as karma phala data, Bhagavan does what has to be done. And then why I need not sit down and waste my energy trying to retaliate. Just let it be. That is called Kshama. Leave it up to the one who's responsible for it, which is not us. Tadanam is so at the end of the whole thing, there are some things which one has to suffer, or one suffers. Take it as a prarabdham, he says. Until karma kshayat, until that prarabdham, it is meant to be. Perhaps I'm paying a price for something, just like a fine. So sometimes you get a fine, you contest, you get traffic violation, they give you a fine, and you think you didn't do anything wrong. And so this it takes so much effort. It's a greater punishment to sometimes fight the fine and then lose than you just in the beginning itself you pay the fine and relieve yourself. So what do you tell yourself? Oh well, it was meant to something. Like prarabdham, and so you give it up and endure it. What cannot be cured must be endured. The next two verses are there. These are just two cut a couple of metaphors are given. So let's look at them quickly. Ayurgachati petika jalamiva yakwaiva deham javar gachatindriya shaktayopi kulata yadvannaram nirdhanam prajna gacchati davadaha samaye shrini mriginamiva ज्ञात्वा सत्वरमाश्रयात्म पदवीं देहं वृथा कथा वृथा पेटिका पेटिका jalam iva. Petika is a straw basket, and jalam is the water. The water, you pour water in a straw basket. What does happen? It just flows away. It doesn't stay. So, like that, just as the water drains out of a basket that is made of straw, it says quickly, Javat, even Ayuhu Gachati. Life also, once life seems to be draining away, that as fast. In the sense, you have nothing, you have no control over it. Then he says, Kulata, Iva Prajna Gachati. Kulata is so, not a biological son, somebody who's like a son. So here is a person who you look upon like a son. And then what happens? He says, so by Indriya Shaktaya, oh, Kulata Iva Yadvad Naran Devdanam. All the Indriya, all your sense organs, etc., are going away. They are lost. I lost them quickly before I realized it. How? Like even the Dhanam, Nirdhanam, I become poor. I become penniless because of what? Well, this fellow who I considered like my son. I treated him like my son. So somebody, maybe some child, somebody other than my really son, maybe son-in-law, whatever. So all my dhanam me took away. So like that, it is gone. This Once knowledge goes away, prajna, like even a herd of deer running away in a forest fire, how they scatter. Like that, my knowledge seems to have gone or going, he says. Satvaram Ashraya. So Atma Padavim, Atma Jnanam. So Ashraya, seek. All these things are happening quickly. So seek, he says, refuge. Seek refuge and gain in what? In Atma Padavim is Atma Jnanam. And what? Deham. Vritha ma krita. Do not so identify with the limitations of the body, mind, etc. So this is one metaphor. And then another metaphor also, beautiful metaphor is given. Here he says there are certain qualities. So life is going fast, but there are certain gunas, certain qualities that are like gems, he says. Like even the gems that came out of this Amrita Mathanam. We all know that story. So in the churning of the ocean, many of these Ratnams have come out, he says. So different Ratnams like Mandara Vanam. Can I just read it first? धैर्यार धै धैर्यैरावत शान्तिधेनु तमः सन्मन्दारवृन्दं सदा मैत्र्यद्याप्सरसं विवेकतुरगं सन्तोषचिन्तामणिम् आत्माज्ञानमहामृतं समरसं नैराश्यचन्द्रोदयम् वेदान्तार्णवमाश्रयन् अनुदिनं सेवस्व muktishriyam. He says, so sevasva Vedanta Arnavam Ashrayam. Seek refuge in Vedanta Arnavam. Vedanta. So this Arnav, the ocean is like Vedanta, Vedanta Shastram. And this in the churning of the ocean, all these Ratnams came out. You know, 14, 14 jewels, different kinds of jewels. Like this Mandara Pushpam, this Vanam, the Mandara tree. Then it says Dhenu, Kamadhenu, Kamadhenu, Apsaras like Ramba came up. Then this Uchai horse, the Turagam, he comes. These are all the horse of Indra Devata. Okay, Chintamani, Kaustuba Chintamani. So like that, all these are born of the churning. So he says, so look upon Vedantam, Vedanta Shastram as the ocean, and your Shravanam, Mananam, study, the practices, religious practices, and so on are the churning. And when here, what happens? So here, born of that becomes the jewel. Seek the jewel that is in the form of Atmajnana. Why? Because the life is draining away. The Indriyas are draining away so fast before we realize it. So he concludes this particular verses with these two beautiful metaphors. Okay. So there's a lot. This is not something, it has to be read repeatedly. Look at the words, dwell upon them, contemplate upon them, and to be absorbed. This is not like a list, so many things are said here. It's not something one has to memorize. Oh, this is an A is and B is C and D like that. This is a general, so looking at the connections. So there are certain tendencies are there, and they are certain connected to certain attitudes and a certain lifestyle. So what we need to overcome them. So it requires repeated reading and also some reflection. Okay. So with that, I think I'll conclude this particular text. ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ